Great. Thanks so much for anybody who wasn't here last night. We're so thankful that you've joined us today. We have a lot to cover, so I don't want to spend a lot of time, just delaying whatever. But one of the things that I will tell you is, so we have 3 presenters this morning, and we will have discussion time around your table. And I want to encourage you during that time to engage in the conversations. I know, it's tempting to just, hang out with your friends and chat about, what you're going to do tomorrow after church or whatever. But I encourage you, as they give you stuff to talk about, actually try to engage that as best as you possibly can. That's how you will get the most out of these conversations, all right? And so without any further ado, we had Rick, who shared last night. And if you were here last night, you understand that joke. And he did such a great job, and we're so thankful and honored to welcome him back this morning. And so let's give it up for Rick Carrol.
That's the best. I'm just Rick. If I could always be known as just Rick, that would be amazing. So I want to pick up a little off of where we were last night. And last night we were talking about how to be coming through trauma without being traumatized. And today I wanted us to have a conversation about are we online ministers or are we YouTube stars? And I asked last night how many of you immediately when the pandemic hit, how many of you immediately went, we need to be YouTube stars? Is Ben are you here yet? I saw Ben somewhere. Ben and Jesse had a conversation about we need to be YouTube stars, right? That was the first 2 weeks of online ministry. And Megan, our children's pastor, she regularly signs autographs. I told you last night, on Sunday mornings when kids come. That's Megan from Portico Kids TV, and she does autographs. So I'm kind of her groupie. And there's no shame in wanting to gain followers so that we can introduce people to Jesus. That is a 100% a strategy. And we have to do that in our online world. And online ministry should be part. If it's not part of your strategy going forward, you're missing the majority of the world. So you're missing something if you're not there, but it's absolutely frustrating in other ways because of who we are, because of the expectations, because of the limitations. And so today what I want to do is discuss 7 realities that I've thrown out to my team. So my team's already been thinking about this. My elders have already been thinking about these reflections, and I want to throw them to you, and we can have some discussions maybe collectively about them and how you are dealing with them, how you are seeing them in your life and in your church. And then the last 15 minutes or so of my time, I just want to walk through 3 constants from Paul's ministry that I think should not change regardless if we're YouTube stars. And I use the word minister very intentionally. Most of you would cringe at that word and go, I'm not a minister, I'm a youth worker, I'm a kids pastor, I'm whatever I am. But we need to remind ourselves that the reason why minister was a word that we used off the bat is because we attend to people's needs. That's what a minister does. We assist people. We come alongside people. We attend to the need that somebody has. It's the biblical root of who we are. And we see this word in other segments of society. There's ministers in parliament. There's ministers of justice, and we all have our understanding of how some of those individuals function. But we are also ministers of the gospel. And we laugh at how corrupt and how backwards we see ministers of parliament function sometimes. We laugh at, or we actually are saddened and deeply hurt by how we see justice administered by the ministers of justice in our police systems, and go what exactly are they doing? What exactly are they ministering? And we have spent a year really examining the real hurt and damage that has been done when people don't minister things correctly. So it's a good question for us to consider, what exactly are we ministering when we're online, when we are doing ministry in the context of this world? So just off the bat, what obstacles over the last 18 months are you facing in terms of trying to do online ministry? Just throw them out. What obstacles are you facing right now trying to do online ministry? Production, yeah. cost of production or trying to do production or what? Oh, yeah. All right. Production. What else? Keeping interest, yeah. People are no longer watching, and I'm doing this for an audience of one. Okay. What else? Yeah. So they watch, but they're not engaged. Yeah. So we did at Easter this year. I did a thing about the rock, which was big, has been rolled away from the tomb. And I go, what is the rock that is heavy, that is separating you from Jesus? That's kind of been, you're not able to see Jesus because the rock has been there. So I had everybody write a word on the rock. Comparison was my word. I went, I don't see Jesus in my life because I'm comparing. Anybody else? All right. So we got seven reflections I want to put up on the screen here. Should I end at 10:30 and then discuss? Is that the? No, we started a little bit late, so you've got 10:35. Okay, I'll end at 10:35 and then. Okay, so first one is this: as you minister online, here's my first reflection. Less people will not attend. There are not going to be fewer people that want to know who Jesus is, but they will attend less. You are not going to see people in your youth ministry or your kids ministry or your church as often as you did pre-pandemic. I believe there are some people that like online. I believe some people have totally shifted their lives, and you're not going to see them. So you are going to have to be a minister knowing that if you used to have 50, you might only have 30. And it's not because you have less people who are following you. You just aren't going to see them. And that's going to affect us. That's going to affect our volunteers. Well, we'll get to that in a minute. But we are going to have a different lens because they're going to come less often or they're going to engage with us differently. And we can't shame people into saying, you're not here in front of my face as often. We just have to understand that the same amount of people want to know who Jesus is and need to know who Jesus is. They may just be in our program less. And number two, people will follow us at higher rates and they will attend our facilities. So that kind of is a bounce off that. So we absolutely need to create followings because they're not necessarily going to attend our facility. You may have people in your church, and this used to just be for the international churches where it's all over the world that people are following you. Now, I was talking to the guys from Woodstock last night. They did a baptism from a guy from Lethbridge last week because he was visiting and he's part of their church and he wanted to be baptized at their church, so he had to fly from Lethbridge to Woodstock to get baptized. And then they had a group, I forget which nation, it was somewhere in Africa. He was saying that they have a home church, they have a watch party, and they were doing baptisms too. So they're doing baptisms from a guy from Lethbridge that had to fly in, and they're trying to pastor a group somewhere in the southeast hemisphere. They're following them, but they're not at their facility. So we have to figure that one out. The same amount of dollars are going to be given, but they're going to be given differently. People will not just give to your kids' ministry because they're good people anymore, or they won't just give to your missions because they believe in missions. If you don't tell the right story, people aren't going to give. But if you do tell the right story, people actually are giving more. We were able to give $150,000 more out of our church to international missions this year, which is unbelievable in the midst of the pandemic. But it's because every week we put one of our global workers up and said, just tell us what's happening, tell us what you're doing, tell us what the need is. And people just gave and gave and gave and gave. But they didn't just give to our general fund, but they gave $150,000 more to missions because we told those stories. So they're not going to give at the same, but if you tell the right story, they will give. And that's going to be a challenge. Number 4, my reflection is the expectation for excellence in production quality has increased as the ease of home production has increased. So you got people in your church that are operating YouTube channels that are way beyond what you're doing, way beyond what I'm doing, and they're doing it just out of their basement, just doing it on whatever camera they have, because they don't have X, Y, and Z on their plate. They're just running their channel. So you're being judged not only against those people, but also against people that have multi-million-dollar production studios. So that's fun. There will be an expectation to respond to things as immediately as culture in social media does. So you're going to have an answer from God about what to do for everything that happens when somebody's canceled, when somebody's killed, when somebody makes a statement, you're going to, so check this out. So now you're getting really good at like, hey, I've got September's kids ministry all done, ready to go. It's loaded. It's in the queue. Awesome. And then something crazy happens on August the 29th. What are you going to do? Are you going to scrap all the work that you've done? And like you feel like, yes, I've been ready. Megan's been writing curriculum for months. You've been filming stuff. And if something happens on September the 1st and you don't respond to it, you're going to be judged and you're going to be told you're irrelevant and you could be canceled because you put out what you had produced in July and August. So that's fun. We're now serving 5 to 6 generations in one church, which we have never had to serve before. So in your church, you got baby boomers, Gen X, and millennials. You've got Gen Z and the alpha generation has started to now come and participate in church, and you still have some older than boomers, the silent generation. So you have 6 generations that expect you to be relevant to them online and in person, and serve their needs and speak in a way that resonates with them, which is impossible. So good on you. And the last one is that there'll be an increased desire to customize personal church experience. And that's because everything is customized. School's customized, work's customized. You can work from home. You can do school when you want. You don't even, in school, I love it. You don't have to hand in anything anymore, right? Like, we all know that, like, you've all started experiencing this. Like, if kids want to do one assignment out of the 10 that are due and they get 80%, they get an A in their mark. So they're like, that's fantastic. I got an A. I did 10% of the work and I got an A. And if you want, you do your work when you want, whatever works for you. So, and then we tell them to show up at a certain time because we value community. And you're like, I'm not showing up for that. I'll watch you when I want to watch you, how I want to watch you, because I do that with every bit of my life. So for a few minutes, just around your tables, before I get into the devotional part, reflect on some of these. Which ones of these are true for you? Which ones of these are challenges for you? What on there is missed? And love just we'll hear some reflections in just a minute, but I want to give you 5 or 6 minutes. Just talk around your tables. Which of these are real for you? Which of these are the biggest challenges for you? I want to take the next 10 minutes and just share with you 3 constants for ministry, and then we'll give you a little bit of time to wrap up in the end. 3 constants for ministry from Paul's ministry that have never changed, that should not change, that should align us as ministers going forward. Reflection for us all to do. You realize that the jobs that you hold right now did not exist in church, have only existed in church for like 50 years. Like, there were no kids and youth pastors, and in a lot of our churches, there were no kids and youth pastors probably in those churches 20 years ago. So your profession will change. Our professions always change. Change is a constant in church and life. But ministry does not change. So I want to look at Paul's letter to Timothy, both letters, context for us. In 1 Timothy, Paul has been jailed once, but he is released. He's back out. He's traveling. He's a worldwide preacher. He's famous. People love him. He is discipling people, or people within the church love him. People outside the church hate him. But he's a guy in how he would equate to our society. I'd put him like a Stephen Furtick, a Joel Houston. He's a hero for young pastors. And then in 2 Timothy, it's very different. He's in jail. He's in Rome probably. His friends couldn't get to him. He knew he was going to die. And he's offering encouragement to Timothy. And he identifies a few marks of what ministry looks like in 2 Timothy. So that's why the tone of 1 Timothy is different, because the tone of 1 Timothy, he's an influencer. In the 2 Timothy, you realize, I'm now going to die, and I need to tell you what ministry is about. And so with everything you've just discussed, and we had interesting conversation at our table, it kind of centered around we're terrified to say the wrong thing and not say it quick enough, and know that that's going to be online forever, know that we could be canceled for what we do post, or we could be destroyed for what we don't post, and just kind of the weight that carries. These are 3 constants that should not leave us as ministers. Number 1 is prayer. I've been in ministry for 20 years, and I know that I don't pray enough. I don't know about you. I know I do not pray enough. My life is filled with stuff, church, family, hobbies, and I don't pray enough. I talk to mentors in my life and older pastors, and they have hours a day to read and pray. I do not seem to take hours a day to read and pray. I would like to. I have not figured out how to right now. 2 Timothy 1 and 3. I thank God for you. Now, he's in jail. He's an older pastor. He's in jail. He has time. That's the key right there. But he says, the God I serve with a clear conscience, just as my ancestors did, night and day, I constantly remember you in my prayers. He is praying for his young disciple. And it's a concept that I like and I want to do, but it's interesting if we really were to boil it down, the things we choose to put into our days all of the time. So do a self-assessment. How many of you show up to the office half an hour late multiple days a week? Don't put your hands up. How many of you spend, my staff, yeah. How many of you spend 30 minutes connecting with another staff regularly during the week, just chatting? How many of you go 15 minutes, I'll put it at 15 minutes down a TikTok hole? How many of you spend hours researching new games? How many of you obsess over the room decor? Now, do any of you believe it has more eternal value doing any of those things than praying over your kids or students? The spiritual answer would be no. But our lifestyle says otherwise. Our lifestyle says, because we got to produce a video, because we got to be engaging, because we need social, we fill our lives with all of these things. And I totally understand that we are leaders in organizations. We are facilitating church in a very new world where we have to produce content and live stuff, online content and live stuff. And I spend a minimum of 40 hours a week just leading our organization, like not ministering, just leading the organization. And I want it to grow. And I'm measured on if it grows or not. You're evaluated if your group is growing. Like, you know this, right? You are paid for this. So then we have to ask ourselves, do we have a job or do we have a calling? And it kind of what we got back to last night. Whether I have a job or not, I have a calling, I have a gifting. So every day, regardless of what you're doing, if you're not praying for your kids, for your students, you're missing one of the earmarks of what Paul would say to Timothy, going, this is what it comes down to. I just pray for you. And if we are truly ministers, not just YouTube stars, then we are praying for these kids every day. Listen, and remember, we're talking about listening, just spending time listening to God. Wow, that would be amazing if we had time for that, but we'd have to shift some things. Number 2, what is critical that will not change regardless of what your job is the Holy Spirit gifting will never change. The gifts of empowerment that the Holy Spirit gives us. There's no better feeling than having a bigger youth group or kids ministry. We measure them for ourselves. We evaluate ourselves against other people. We drop. If numbers start to drop in what we're leading, you're going to question why. I'm going to question why. I'm going to go like, why are fewer people attending? Now, we just talked about fewer people are going to attend. And then that is the new reality. And it's easy to see how many people viewed a video, how many followers you've gained this week. But the question really should be, how many of those people that viewed you are you discipling? Are you praying for? Are you seeing the Holy Spirit come into their life and change their life? How many of them are just people that found you because it was funny, people that followed a hashtag, people that are your family that are watching this stuff, people that are your friends that are watching? I remember Ben and I were talking. We had more young adults watching our youth ministry IG lives last year than youth for a while. And we were like 100 views, 20 kids, but 100 views today. 100 people were on that call, 20 of them were students. How many are we discipling? But it feels good, right? But we have to be real. How many are we discipling that are coming to Jesus and being filled with the Spirit? 2 Timothy 2, 5 and 6, Paul's talking to Timothy. He goes, Timothy, I remember your genuine faith, because he knew Timothy. He spent time with Timothy. He prayed for Timothy. The faith you share that first filled your grandmother Lois and your mother Eunice. And I know that some faith continues strong in you. This is why I remind you to fan into flame the spiritual gift that God gave you when I laid my hands on you. If we don't know the stories of our kids that we are discipling, and obviously we're not laying hands on people right now, but if you don't know the stories of the kids, their families, what they're going through, what's happening, and you don't know them enough to go, I know the faith that's in you. Now can I pray for you for this giftedness? Can I pray for you that you would be filled with the Spirit? Then we are missing something in what we are doing. Not saying we can't do what we're doing, but we have to find a way to do this. Be honest, if you had to choose big numbers right now, if you had to choose, you double your numbers of views or discipling a small group of kids that you would know who their mother is, who their grandmother is, and you'd see them filled with the Spirit, which would you choose? Again, spiritual question, and we know the spiritual answer. Because I know what regularly we do choose. Regularly we do choose more followers. Because there's somewhere in our minds that go, but if I get more followers, I'll have the opportunity to disciple them. But if you never shift what you do to actually discipling, then no, you are not discipling them. You will just always go for more followers. If you go down the road that says, there will come a point when I stop trying to gain more and more followers, and then I'll shift to discipleship, you never will. But if you start with, I'm just gonna pray for people, and I'm just gonna disciple them. I'm gonna pray that they're filled with the Spirit, and that's the most critical thing. You might find that God sends more people your way. You might find that He doesn't, but you're actually discipling people, and that should be a constant of what we are doing. Literally, we choose that all the time. When Jesus modeled a very different ministry, he had the crowds, he did, but he discipled the 12. Paul knew Timothy's mother and his grandmother by name. We're just laughing. We go, we've got 40% of the churches are back. That's about average. We know that 30% are online. There's another 30% of views. We don't know who they are. We don't know if they're family. We don't know. And I'm not discipling them. They're listening to content. I'm not discipling them. I pray that God's doing something in them, but as a pastor, that's not what I'm called to do. So we should fight the desire to be the star continually. So we would pray that we would see people filled with the Spirit. And the last one is this I want to share is that what needs to be a constant we see in Paul's ministry is that we would have boldness. I believe that sometimes soon the Bible will become hate speech in Canadian society. We have truth that needs to be shared and needs to be shared in love. And that's a small phrase with power that is unbelievably difficult. Paul was in jail being treated as a heretic, speaking out against a society that was highly sexual. There was sex slaves and sex worship prostitutes and rampant homosexuality in the army, and there was a caste system, and there was Romans and non-Romans, Jews and Greeks, slaves and free. And Paul is able to speak into that world and go, I just want to tell you about a God that loves each and every one of us the exact same and calls us to a standard of the exact same. So there's sin is sin is sin. It doesn't matter if you've got two teenagers sleeping together, male and female or male and male. It's sexual sin, right? Like we get this. So let's stop. Lust is the same as that. So it's just sin that we need to speak to in our society with love, being bold. And we are terrified to do that online because if we say the wrong thing, we're going to be canceled. But that's what Paul did. And he would say to Timothy, chapter 1, 7 and 8, God has not given us a spirit of fear and timidity, but love and power and self-discipline. So never be ashamed to tell others about our Lord. Don't be ashamed of me either, even though I'm in prison, because he was hated. With the strength that God gives you, be ready to suffer with me for the sake of the good news. How confident are you to speak truth to your kids and your students right now, Bible truth, knowing how it's going to be received? The stuff that you would get canceled for, but is right biblically. How confident are you even that it's still true? Or has some of it kind of shaken you? I love this thought. This is something that God's really been impressing on me. What feels right for us may not actually be right for us. And accepting every feeling we have as helpful and true is not only dangerous, but it will ultimately lead us away from God. We know that 90 some odd % of our students will have suicidal thoughts. And it feels right, but it isn't right for them. Or it feels that I should do this. Feelings lead us astray all the time. And discipleship and teaching is all about, Jesus said, then he said to the crowd, Luke 9:23, if anyone wants to be my follower, give up your own way. Take up your cross and daily follow me. This is a generation that absolutely needs truth. They need disciples. They need disciple makers. They need people that say, I'm not interested in just getting the masses. I'm interested in getting in with these kids. And if God sends me masses, awesome, I'll do it mass scale. And if he sends me 3, then I'll disciple these 3. But the constants that we see from Paul is that he was going to pray for Timothy. He knew that giftedness that Timothy had. He had that discipleship. And he encouraged him to speak boldly. So I think we've probably got about 5 minutes or so. Just talk around your table. How do we integrate these kinds of things, knowing the expectations that we have? Like, we have big expectations to build ministries that actually engage our society. How do we continue to be bold? How do we continue to see people filled with the Spirit? How do we continue to disciple people and pray for people in this new online lens? We'll go ahead, and then Wayne will come back and bring us on to our next one.